As you can tell by the video description, what I'm going to talk about is pretty much self-explanatory. While the Batman Arkham series has shown us that quality superhero games can actually be fun, true to the character and taken seriously, Superman on the other hand has a laundry list of problems given how the Superman games that have been released on the market have been complete garbage. This ranges from the abysmal Superman 64 to Superman Returns on the 7th generation of consoles. I'm going to clear the air on an interesting proposal that a lot of fans have clamored for ever since Arkham Knight wrapped things up on the Dark Knight with Rocksteady. A lot of people believe that Rocksteady Studios, the creators behind the Arkham franchise, could possibly bring Superman into the limelight with their creative talents being so good. I think this is more of a pipe dream if anything. No one in the history of video game development has captured the essence of Superman properly in the gameplay department that increases the overall fun factor. Every other attempt at this, excluding Injustice, just has been plain old boring, from flying through various rings in the N64 game to saving stupid cats for unlockables in Superman Returns. Rocksteady is a good development team and there's no disputing the obvious. However, there's a lot of hurdles and obstacles to overcome that just run into game design issues when creating a Superman game. The core issue is, since Superman is so overpowered, how can you make a video game fun centered on him? He has all these powers that the typical player would consider fun, like super speed, flying, heat vision, and freeze breath. Who wouldn't want to go around with all those powers and use them to their advantage? Then if you start to think deeper, if there's no interesting enemies crafted around Superman, then what is the point if things get repetitive and you can steamroll through everything? What is the point if Superman can't be taken down by normal enemies without the concept being utterly ridiculous or shoehorning in kryptonite? The latter is the only thing a developer can do, much to the aggravation of the player if they have to worry about enemies severely weakening them all the time. You see what I mean? The more people think about this at a technical standpoint, the more the idea of a Superman game that aims for quality is something that should be relatively untouched. Even in most power fantasy games like Infamous, Prototype, and the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, there's always a risk and reward for each new situation you find yourself into when it comes to fighting enemies relatively stronger or close to the same level that you are as a player, which creates these entertaining powerhouse boss fights. Superman has none of this. Since he's so strong, Doomsday only slowed his heart down, but that's about it. In fact, if you take a look at Superman Red Son, most of Superman's realization of his actions over the course of that story was brought down to a psychological level by Lex Luthor. So it's really weird, even though you're put into a power fantasy situation where you're the big dog, you're always on top, you're super strong, when it comes to certain bosses and interactions, for story purposes and for gameplay purposes, it just doesn't mesh out well. Maybe Lex would be good during a story, having a very just strong conversation with Superman, bringing him down, every step of the way, because he's the most intelligent man so far in Metropolis. But when you think about this for gameplay, it's really boring. You can't technically be defeated. They have to put in these little conventions and perks of kryptonite to really bring your player character down. It's going to be annoying. There's a lot of stuff that you probably can and can't do. It's just boring when you really think about a video game in the context for Superman from a gameplay standpoint. And going back to my previous point, that's why I think the Arkham games are interesting, because there's so much weight in gameplay that can be put behind them that actually works. Batman can die, Batman can get hurt, Batman can get stabbed, Batman can get punched. He's just a human with a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? He's just a human being with a lot of cash, and he has to take out his enemies in a certain way, either by brute force or by sneaking up on them, which brings in a lot of stealth, a lot of things you can use, his gadgets, the works. He's basically a super detective, and they built that entire gameplay premise around Batman. That's why it works so well, because all these conventions of stealth and action, it existed in the past, but when it comes to a superhero game, a lot of thought has to go into it if you're playing up the power fantasy role. Then when you think about this more, you have to consider the amount of work that has to go into an open world where every building, texture, and piece of geometry can be destroyed or damaged, because Superman should have that power to tank through everything, right? Well, wrong. Even with that notion in mind, there's the level of destruction that you have to think about and the moral standpoint argument that happened during the Man of Steel being brought into practice. Get ready to hear such glorious complaints brought into the gameplay because of the technicality of it all. Superman doesn't terrorize innocent people or blows through buildings intentionally. So would you rather have these choices stripped away from you in favor of giving a city a health bar as a cheap way to save the innocent? The patriotic red and blue just creates far more hurdles than you can imagine. Some players, maybe they want to play God. Some players, maybe they want to be good. Some players, maybe they want to be neutral or evil, and with the powers you have, you won't have any limitations to your abilities. I think if you know how Superman is from the comics, then of course you're going to expect him to fall in line with being protective of the innocent and having this gameplay built around him with no choice whatsoever. I'll give Infamous credit. That video game gives you the choice to be good or evil, and I love that concept. Actions are tied to those specific chains, and it ties in rather well to the gameplay. It's something that has become a series standard for that gameplay franchise alone, whereas just being limited and good all the time with Superman is once again boring from a gameplay perspective. In the end, a video game with a lot of proposed things where you have to do mundane tasks, you have to abide by rules in a video game power fantasy, you can't die, and so many negatives outweigh the positives when it comes to a Superman title. It's just not a good idea in theory, and in practice, maybe the Man of Steel deserves to be right where he belongs, in fighting games, in spin-offs, in other adaptations. Don't get me wrong, I would love to be proven wrong someday with a good, actual, great Superman game. I would love if they found a way to break all the doubts and conventions and make it reasonable. Given with Superman's video game history being absolute shit, I do think he deserves a good video game, but until a developer steps up to the challenge, this philosophy still remains to be seen. This is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this gaming discussions video of why there will never, ever be a good Superman game, in my opinion. I will see you guys next time. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you later. Take care.